Danny Carter walked down the busy street of New Haven Colony with his school bag hanging over his shoulder. The afternoon sun was warm on his face as he made his way through the market district. Alien vendors sold strange fruits and glowing crystals, while human shopkeepers called out prices for everyday items. The colony was peaceful, and Danny had always felt safe here. He was 16 years old and had lived on New Haven for most of his life. His mother Linda worked as the head nurse at the medical center, and they had a small but comfortable home on the edge of town. Danny rarely thought about his father, who had left when he was young. His mother never talked much about him except to say he worked for the military back on Earth. The market was busy today with people from different worlds shopping and trading. Danny recognized most of the alien species from his school lessons. There were the tall, blue-skinned Altarians, who were known for their peaceful nature. The small, fuzzy Corvians scurried around selling their handmade jewelry. Even a few of the mysterious Etherians floated by in their shimmering robes. Danny was thinking about the homework he needed to finish when a loud voice called out behind him. He turned to see 3 tall reptilian soldiers pushing their way through the crowd. They wore the black and silver uniforms of the Zephyrian military. Their scaly green skin gleamed in the sunlight, and their yellow eyes scanned the crowd with obvious disdain. The leader of the group was taller than the others, with more decorations on his uniform. Danny could see the rank markings that identified him as a commander. The alien's forked tongue flicked out as he spoke in accented English. "You human boy, stop right there," the commander said, pointing a clawed finger at Danny. Danny stopped and looked around confused. Other people in the market began to move away, sensing trouble. The Zephyrians were known for their aggressive nature and short tempers. Most colonists tried to avoid them when possible. "Yes, sir," Danny said politely. "Is there something wrong?" The commander stepped closer, and Danny could smell the musky scent of the reptilian alien. The other 2 soldiers moved to flank Danny, blocking any escape routes. Their hands rested on the energy weapons at their sides. "I am Commander Vex Thorn of the 3rd Zephyrian Regiment," the alien said. "We are conducting routine security inspections. You will submit to a search immediately." Danny frowned and took a step back. He knew the basic laws of the colony. The Zephyrians were supposed to work with human security forces, not conduct their own operations. They certainly were not supposed to randomly search colonists without cause. "Sir, I think you need to contact Colonial Security if you want to search someone," Danny said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Governor Mason made it clear that all searches require proper authorization." The commander's eyes narrowed and a low hissing sound came from his throat. The other soldiers tensed, and Danny realized he had made a mistake. These aliens clearly did not like being questioned by a human teenager. "Did this whelp just tell us what we can and cannot do?" one of the other soldiers said with a laugh that sounded like grinding rocks. "I think he did, Sergeant Kraux," Commander Thorne replied. "Perhaps he needs to learn some respect for his betters." Danny's heart started beating faster as he realized the situation was getting dangerous. He looked around, hoping to see Captain Brooks or one of the other human security officers, but the market had mostly emptied as word of the confrontation spread. "I did not mean any disrespect, sir," Danny said, backing away slowly. "I was just saying what I learned in school about colonial law." Commander Thorne stepped forward aggressively. His clawed hand shot out and grabbed Danny by the front of his shirt. The alien's strength was incredible, and Danny felt his feet leave the ground as he was lifted up. "Colonial law," the commander spat. "Human law means nothing here, boy. We are the law in this world, and you will learn to obey." Danny tried to pull free, but the alien's grip was like iron. The other 2 soldiers moved closer, forming a tight circle around them. People in the nearby shops watched through windows, but no one dared to intervene. "Let me go," Danny said, struggling against the powerful grip. "I have not done anything wrong." "Wrong," Sergeant Kraux laughed. "Your very existence is wrong, human. Your kind spreads across the galaxy like a disease, thinking you own every world you touch." Commander Thorne tightened his grip, and Danny felt the fabric of his shirt tearing. The alien's yellow eyes blazed with hatred, and something else that made Danny's stomach turn with fear. "Your people need to learn their place," the commander hissed. and lessons must be taught to the young before bad habits form. The first blow came without warning. Commander Thorne's free hand struck Danny across the face with enough force to make his vision blur. The alien's claws left burning scratches across his cheek, and Danny tasted blood in his mouth. "Please stop," Danny gasped, but the soldiers only laughed. The beating that followed was methodical and brutal. The Zephyrians dragged Danny into a nearby alley away from the main street. They took turns hitting him with their fists and the butts of their weapons. Danny tried to protect himself, but he was no match for 3 trained soldiers. Commander Thorne seemed to take special pleasure in the violence. He aimed his blows carefully to cause maximum pain without killing. Danny's ribs cracked under the assault, and he felt something tear inside his chest. Blood ran from his nose and mouth as he curled up on the dirty ground. "This is what happens to humans who forget their place," the commander said between blows. "Tell your friends. Tell your family. We are in charge here now." Danny lost consciousness as a boot connected with his head. The last thing he heard was the sound of the soldiers laughing as they walked away, leaving him bleeding in the alley. Mrs. Betty Walsh found him 20 minutes later when she came to empty her shop's garbage. The elderly shopkeeper took one look at the unconscious boy and ran to call for help. She had seen the Zephyrian soldiers leaving the alley but knew better than to confront them directly. The medical team arrived quickly and rushed Danny to the Colonial Medical Center. His mother, Linda, was already on duty, and her face went white when she saw her son's condition. The doctors worked for hours to stabilize him. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion, but he would live. Governor Mason arrived at the medical center within an hour demanding answers. Captain Brooks had already begun an investigation, but the Zephyrian military was claiming diplomatic immunity. Commander Thorne filed a report stating that Danny had attacked them first and they had acted in self-defense. Linda Carter sat by her son's bedside holding his hand as the machines monitored his vital signs. For the first time in years, she thought about calling Jack. She had sworn never to involve him in their lives again, but looking at Danny's battered face, she wondered if she had a choice. The colony that had seemed so peaceful that morning now felt dangerous and uncertain. Word of the attack spread quickly through the human community. Some called for justice, while others feared making the situation worse. The Zephyrian soldiers continued their patrols, acting as if nothing had happened. In his hospital bed, Danny drifted in and out of consciousness, unaware that his beating would soon bring consequences that no one on New Haven could imagine. Linda Carter stood in the hospital communication room staring at the blank screen. Her hands shook as she entered the secure military frequency she had memorized years ago but never used. The number was supposed to reach Jack anywhere in the galaxy, but she had no idea if it still worked. Danny had been unconscious for 8 hours now. The doctor said his condition was stable, but he would need weeks to recover fully. The beating had been savage and deliberate. Linda had seen enough trauma cases to recognize professional brutality when she saw it. The screen flickered to life, showing the logo of Earth Military Command. A young officer appeared asking for identification codes. Linda provided the emergency family contact information she had hoped never to use. "Please hold, ma'am," the officer said. "We are attempting to locate the individual you requested." Linda waited, knowing that Jack might be anywhere in the galaxy. He could be on a deep space mission or in some place where communications were impossible. She had not spoken to him in 3 years since their last argument about his dangerous work. The screen changed, and suddenly Jack's face appeared. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray touching his dark hair. He was in what appeared to be a military facility with stark white walls behind him. "Linda," he said, and she could see the concern in his expression. "What happened?" "It's Danny," she said, and watched Jack's face harden. "He was attacked by Zephyrian soldiers. They'd beat him badly, Jack. He's in intensive care." Jack was quiet for a long moment, and Linda could see something dangerous flickering in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, but she heard the steel underneath. "How bad?" "3 broken. RIBS, internal bleeding, concussion," Linda said. "The doctors say he'll recover, but Jack, these aliens nearly killed our son. Where are you?" New Haven colony in the Centauri sector, Linda replied. The colonial government is trying to cover it up. They say the soldiers have diplomatic immunity. Jack's expression did not change, but Linda saw his hands clench into fists. She remembered that look from their marriage. It usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. I'm coming, Jack said simply. Jack, you can't just... Linda started, but the screen went dark. She stood alone in the communication room, wondering what she had just unleashed. Jack Carter was not the kind of man who let attacks on his family go unpunished. She had left him precisely because of what he was capable of when someone threatened the people he loved. 18 hours later, Linda was checking on Danny when Captain Brooks knocked on the hospital room door. The security chief looked nervous and kept glancing over his shoulder. Mrs. Carter, he said quietly. There's someone here to see you. Linda followed him to the hospital lobby, where a man in civilian clothes waited by the entrance. For a moment she did not recognize him. Jack had always been tall and lean, but now he seemed somehow more solid. He moved with the kind of careful control that suggested barely contained violence. Hello, Linda, he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. Jack, she replied, and suddenly felt tears. She had been holding back for hours. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled her into his arms. For a moment she let herself feel safe in his embrace. Jack had always been able to make her feel protected, even when she knew how dangerous he really was. How is he? Jack asked, releasing her. Stable, Linda said. Do you want to see him? Jack nodded and followed her through the hospital corridors. Captain Brooks trailed behind them, clearly wanting to ask questions but not daring to interrupt. Linda could see other staff members watching curiously as they passed. Danny was awake when they entered his room. His face was swollen and bruised, but his eyes were alert. He looked at Jack with confusion and something that might have been recognition. Dad, Danny said uncertainly. Hello, son, Jack replied, sitting in the chair beside the bed. I'm sorry this happened to you, Mom called you. Danny said it was not a question. She did, Jack confirmed. Tell me what you remember. Danny described the attack in halting sentences. Jack listened without interruption, but Linda could see his jaw tightening with each detail. When Danny finished talking, Jack was very still. The commander's name was Thorne, Danny said. He said humans needed to learn their place. Jack reached out and gently touched his son's hand. You did nothing wrong, Danny. What happened to you was not your fault. The governor says we can't do anything, Danny said bitterly. They have diplomatic immunity. Jack's smile was cold and unpleasant. We'll see about that. He stayed with Danny for another hour, asking careful questions about the colony's security and the Zephyrian military presence. Linda recognized the pattern from years of watching Jack plan missions. He was gathering intelligence that evening. Jack walked through New Haven streets with Captain Brooks. The security chief had finally worked up the courage to ask the questions that were bothering him. I know you're military, Brooks said. But there's something else, isn't there? Jack glanced at him but did not reply. I've been doing security work for 15 years, Brooks continued. I can recognize special operations training when I see it. The way you move, the way you ask questions. You're not regular military, are you? What makes you think that? Because regular military doesn't get transport to the outer colonies in 18 hours, Brooks said. Whatever ship brought you here moved faster than anything in the civilian fleet. They stopped at the alley where Danny had been attacked. Jack examined the bloodstains on the wall and the scuff marks in the dirt. He moved like a hunter studying the trail of his prey. The Zephyrians have been getting more aggressive lately, Brooks said. This isn't the first incident, just the worst. How many incidents? Dozen or so in the past few months, Brooks replied. Mostly intimidation and harassment. Governor Mason orders us to file reports, but nothing ever comes of them. Jack knelt and picked up something from the ground. It was a small piece of black fabric from a Zephyrian uniform. He studied it for a moment, then put it in his pocket. Where are they staying? Military compound on the north side of town, Brooks said. About 50 soldiers total under commander. Thorne's command. Jack nodded and continued his examination of the alley. Brooks watched him work and felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever Jack Carter really was, he was definitely not someone the Zephyrians should have crossed. That night, Jack sat in his hotel room staring out at the lights of New Haven Colony. He had made certain phone calls and accessed certain databases. Information was flowing to him from sources across the galaxy. By morning, he would know everything about Commander Thorne and his unit. He thought about Danny lying in that hospital bed and felt the familiar cold anger that had made him so effective. At his real job, the Zephyrians had made a serious mistake when they decided to hurt his son. Jack opened his travel case and began assembling equipment that definitely had not been included on any passenger manifest. Tomorrow he would begin teaching Commander Thorne and his soldiers why attacking the family of Jack Carter was the last mistake they would ever make. Jack Carter spent 3 days moving through New Haven like a shadow, collecting information about the Zephyrian soldiers. He talked to shopkeepers who had witnessed harassment and families who had been intimidated. The pattern that emerged made his blood run cold. The attacks on colonists were not random acts of violence. They were part of a systematic campaign to break the human spirit on New Haven. Commander Thorne and his soldiers had been carefully testing how far they could push. Before meeting resistance, Mrs. Walsh, the elderly shopkeeper who had found Danny, told Jack about other incidents. A human farmer had been beaten for refusing to pay illegal taxes. A teenage girl had been cornered by soldiers who made crude suggestions about human females. Each time, Governor Mason had accepted the Zephyrian explanations and filed the complaints. "Away, they're getting bolder every week," Mrs. Walsh said as she served Jack coffee in her small shop. "People are scared to go out alone anymore. The children walk in groups and the adults avoid the patrols." Jack listened carefully and made mental notes. The Zephyrians were following a textbook occupation strategy. Create fear through random violence, then offer protection in exchange for submission. He had seen it used on dozens of worlds during his military career. Captain Brooks found Jack at the hospital visiting Danny on the 4th day. The security chief looked tired and frustrated as he pulled Jack aside for a private conversation. "I've been digging into the Zephyrian presence here," Brooks said quietly. "What I found doesn't make sense." "Explain." "They're supposed to be here for joint training exercises with our security forces," Brooks said, "but there haven't been any training sessions. They patrol on their own, make their own rules, and report. Only to their command ship in orbit." Jack nodded, having suspected something like this. "What about their commander?" "That's the strange part," Brooks said. "Commander Thorne reports directly to General Crix Salvane, who's some kind of war hero back on the Zephyrian homeworld. Why would a general send his personal forces to a backwater colony for training?" "Because it's not about training," Jack said simply. Brooks stared at him. "What do you mean?" "They're testing us," Jack explained. "Seeing how much abuse the human colonists will accept before we fight back. If we don't resist here, they'll move to the next colony and then the next." "That's impossible," Brooks protested. "The Galactic Federation would never allow that kind of systematic oppression." Jack's smile was grim. "The Federation only acts when there's proof of wrongdoing. If the attacks look random and the victims don't complain officially, then there's no pattern to investigate." Brooks felt sick as he realized the implications. "Governor Mason is helping them cover it up, probably doesn't even know it," Jack said. "He thinks he's maintaining peace by not making waves." The Zephyrians are counting on that kind of thinking. That evening, Jack made contact with old friends, using encrypted channels that bypassed colonial communications. The responses came back quickly and painted a disturbing picture. Similar incidents were being reported from human colonies across the Outer Rim. The pattern was always the same: aggressive soldiers, random violence, and local officials who looked the other way. One message made Jack pause. It came from Ace Griffin, a bounty hunter who had worked with Jack during the border wars. The message was short but alarming. "Go stop whatever you're planning," the message read. "Word is out that someone is asking questions about Zephyrian operations. The wrong people are taking notice. Your secret is not as safe as you think." Jack deleted the message and began making preparations. If his cover was blown, then he had limited time before the situation became much more complicated. He needed to act soon. The next morning brought The first signs that the Zephyrians were having problems of their own, Commander Thorne's patrol vehicles suffered mysterious breakdowns that stranded his soldiers in remote areas. Their communication equipment began experiencing interference at crucial moments. Supply deliveries from their orbital command ship arrived late or not at all. Sergeant Kraux complained loudly to his commander about the string of mechanical failures. The reptilian soldier was convinced that human saboteurs were responsible but could find no proof. "These colonists are more clever than they appear," Kraux hissed as he examined another disabled patrol vehicle. "They smile and bow, but they work against us in secret." Commander Thorne was less certain. The failures seemed too sophisticated for simple colonist sabotage. Someone with advanced technical knowledge was targeting their operations with surgical precision. It reminded him of stories from the border wars about human special forces who could cripple entire military units without being detected. The thought made Thorne uneasy, but he dismissed it as paranoia. The border wars had ended years ago, and the legendary human commandos were either dead or retired. No special forces operator would waste time on a minor colony dispute. Jack watched the Zephyrian compound from a hidden position in the hills outside town. Through his scope, he could see the soldiers growing nervous and suspicious. They moved in larger groups now and checked their equipment constantly. The psychological pressure was working exactly as intended. Captain Brooks found Jack at his observation post the next evening. The security chief had been tracking Jack's movements and finally located his hiding spot among the rocks overlooking the alien base. "You're him, aren't you?" Brooks said quietly as he settled beside Jack. "Him who?" "The ghost," Brooks said. "I should have recognized the signs earlier." "The way you appeared on New Haven without using normal transport? The tactical knowledge you displayed? The fact that you're systematically dismantling a military unit without firing a shot?" Jack continued studying the compound through his scope, but Brooks could see the slight tensing of his shoulders. "I served in the 47th Infantry during the border wars," Brooks continued. "We heard stories about Phantom Squad and their commander. They said he could appear anywhere and disappear like smoke. They called him the American Ghost. Stories get exaggerated," Jack said finally. "Maybe," Brooks replied. "But if you really are him, then these Zephyrians have no idea what they've gotten themselves into." Jack lowered his scope and looked at Brooks. "If I was this ghost person, what would you do about it?" Brooks was quiet for a long moment. "I'd ask what you need from me to make sure justice gets done. Even if it means going against colonial authority. Governor Mason sold us out the moment he decided to protect those soldiers instead of our people," Brooks said firmly. "Danny Carter is a good kid who didn't deserve what happened to him. If you can make that right, then you have my support." Jack studied the younger man's face and saw the determination there. "Then tomorrow night we're going to send Commander Thorne a message he won't forget." In the Zephyrian compound, Commander Thorne was receiving reports from his increasingly nervous soldiers. The equipment failures were accelerating, and now their sentries were reporting strange shadows moving in the darkness around their perimeter. One guard swore he had seen a figure in human military gear watching the base, but when reinforcements arrived, they found nothing. "Perhaps we should request additional support from General Salvenet," Sergeant Kraux suggested during their evening briefing. "For what?" Thorne snapped. "To tell him we are being defeated by mechanical problems and nervous guards seeing phantoms." But privately, Thorne was beginning to wonder if they had underestimated the humans on New Haven. The systematic nature of their problems suggested a level of organization and capability that simple colonists should not possess. What he did not know was that his worst fears were about to be confirmed. 20 years earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Carter stood in the briefing room of the military cruiser Valiant preparing for what would become known as the liberation of Kepler Station. The space station had been captured by hegemony forces who were using it as a prison for over 200 human civilians, including women and children. Jack studied the tactical display showing the heavily fortified station. His squad of 12 elite soldiers sat around the table listening as he outlined their impossible mission. They would infiltrate the station, disable its defenses, and extract all prisoners while a small fleet of enemy warships patrolled nearby. The brass says it can't be done, Jack told his team. Too many guards, too many variables, too much risk. That's why they're sending us instead of a full assault force. Sergeant Mike Torres grinned at his commander. When has impossible ever stopped us before, sir? The mission took 18 hours and became the stuff of legend. Jack's team moved through the station like ghosts, eliminating sentries and disabling security systems without raising alarms. They freed the prisoners in small groups and evacuated them through maintenance tunnels while enemy forces remained unaware of the breach. When hegemony reinforcements finally arrived, they found an empty station with all their guards unconscious, and no trace of how the rescue had been accomplished. The prisoners were already aboard rescue ships jumping to safety. Jack and his team had vanished like smoke, leaving only their calling card behind in the present. Danny Carter sat up in his hospital bed listening to his father tell stories he had never heard before. Jack had decided it was time for his son to understand what kind of man his father really was and why the Zephyrians had made such a terrible mistake. The Phantom Squad was created during the early days of the border wars, Jack explained. 12 soldiers trained for deep reconnaissance and targeted elimination missions behind enemy lines. We went places regular forces couldn't reach, and did things that officially never happened. What was your calling card? Danny asked, fascinated by these glimpses into his father's past. Jack smiled and pulled out a small metal token from his pocket. It was shaped like a human skull with glowing red eyes and the words "American Ghost" etched below it. We left these at mission sites to let the enemy know who had been there. Why a ghost? Because we appeared without warning, struck without being seen, and disappeared before anyone knew we had been there, Jack said. The enemy forces started calling me the American Ghost, and the name stuck. Danny studied the token with wide eyes. How many missions did you go on? Officially none, Jack replied. Unofficially, we completed 47 operations across 6 star systems. The enemy put a price on my head that was higher than most planetary budgets. Linda entered the room carrying coffee and heard the last part of the conversation. Jack, you don't need to fill his head with war stories. He needs to understand what's happening here, Jack said gently, and why what happened to him is about to have consequences the Zephyrians never expected. That evening, Captain Brooks met Jack at a small cafe on the edge of town. The security chief had been doing research of his own, and what he had discovered made him understand why Jack was so confident about facing 50 alien soldiers. I found some old military records, Brooks said quietly. Most of your files are classified beyond my clearance level, but I saw enough. The Battle of Titan's Edge, the assassination of Mordok, the Destroyer, the Ghost Protocols. You weren't just Special Forces, Jack, you were the Special Forces. Jack sipped his coffee and watched Zephyrian patrols moving through the street outside. That was a long time ago, Brooks. Different war, different enemy, but the same skills, Brooks pointed out. The same training, the same willingness to do whatever it takes to protect people you care about. Maybe, Jack acknowledged. But back then, I had a full squad and military support. Here, it's just me against an entire alien military unit. Brooks leaned forward. Not just you? I've been talking to some of the other colonist people who are tired of being pushed around by these reptilian bullies. Mrs. Walsh has been organizing the shopkeepers. Bill Norton is rallying the farmers. Even some of the younger folks are asking what they can do to help. Jack shook his head. Civilians will just get hurt. This isn't their fight. It became their fight the moment those soldiers decided to beat a 16-year-old boy half to death, Brooks said firmly. You can't protect everyone by doing everything alone, Jack. Before Jack could respond, his communication device buzzed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as General Crick Salvane, and the message was brief but threatening. To the individual interfering with 3rd Regiment operations on New Haven, the message read, You have 24 hours to cease all hostile activities and surrender yourself to colonial authorities. Failure to comply will result in severe consequences for the entire human population of this colony. Jack deleted the message and stood up. Looks like our timeline just got shorter. What are you going to do? Brooks asked. What I always do, Jack replied. Disappear into the shadows and make my enemies wish they had never heard of humans. That night, Jack moved through the Zephyrian compound like the ghost he had once been. Using skills honed over decades of warfare, he penetrated their security perimeter without triggering a single alarm. The alien sentries never saw him coming and woke up hours later with massive headaches and no memory of being knocked unconscious. In the command center, Jack planted a small device that would give him access to all Zephyrian communications. He also left one of his old calling cards on Commander Thorne's desk where the alien would find it in the morning. The message was clear: the American Ghost was back in business. Commander Thorne found the skull token when he arrived at his office and immediately contacted General Salvane. The older Zephyrian listened to the report with growing concern. You are certain it was a human skull token? Salvane asked. Yes, General, Thorne replied. With glowing red eyes and English text identifying the American Ghost, there was a long silence. On the communication channel before Salvane spoke again. Commander, you and your soldiers are in extreme danger. I am dispatching additional forces immediately. General, surely one human cannot be such a threat to an entire regiment. This is not just any human, Salvana said grimly. If the American Ghost is truly on New Haven, then you are facing one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. He is responsible for more hegemony casualties than any other single enemy combatant. His squad once held off an entire fleet at Titan's Edge. Thorne felt his blood run cold. What are your orders, sir? Increase security immediately. Move your soldiers into defensive positions and wait for reinforcements. Do not attempt to engage this individual directly. The Ghost has never been defeated in direct combat, but General Salvin's warnings came too late. Jack had already begun the systematic elimination of Thorne's most aggressive soldiers. Using techniques perfected during the border wars, he struck at isolated patrols and lone sentries. Each death was quick and professional, leaving no evidence except another skull token. By dawn, 3 Zephyrian soldiers were dead, and 5 more were missing. The remaining troops huddled in their compound, afraid to venture out alone. They had gone from predators to prey in a single night. Commander Thorne stood in his command center, staring at the growing collection of skull tokens on his desk. Each one represented another of his soldiers who had encountered the American Ghost. For the first time since arriving on New Haven, he wondered if they might have bitten off more than they could chew. In the hills overlooking the compound, Jack Carter cleaned his weapons and prepared for the next phase of his campaign. The Zephyrians had wanted to teach humans about fear and submission. Now it was time for them to learn what real terror felt like when it came hunting in the night. Commander Thorne made his second fatal mistake on the 5th day when he decided to arrest Danny Carter again. The reptilian officer had convinced himself that capturing the boy would force the American Ghost to reveal himself. He led a squad of 6 soldiers to the hospital, believing that overwhelming force would prevent any rescue attempt. Jack was visiting his son when the Zephyrians burst through the hospital doors. The alien soldiers moved with military precision, sealing exits and establishing a perimeter around the building. Thorne strode into Danny's room with his weapon drawn and his yellow eyes blazing with desperate fury. Jack Carter, also known as the American Ghost, Thorne announced. You will surrender immediately, or your son will pay the price for your crimes against the 3rd Regiment. Jack stood slowly from his chair beside Danny's bed. His movements were careful and controlled, but Linda could see the deadly calm settling over his features. This was the man she had feared during their marriage, the professional killer who emerged when his family was threatened. Let the boy go, Jack said quietly. Your fight is with me. The boy is harboring a terrorist, Thorne replied. He will be detained for questioning about your activities. Perhaps sometime in our cells will loosen his tongue. Danny tried to sit up in his hospital bed despite his injuries. I don't know anything about what my father has been doing. Silence, Sergeant Kraux snapped, striking Danny across the face with his armored glove. Human whelps speak only when spoken to. The blow that followed was so fast that most witnesses never saw it happen. Jack moved like lightning, crossing the room in 2 steps and driving his fist into Kraux's throat. The Zephyrian sergeant dropped his weapon and collapsed choking. And gasping for air that would not come, the other soldiers raised their weapons, but Jack was already moving. He grabbed Kraux's fallen rifle and used it to sweep the legs of the nearest soldier. As that alien fell, Jack spun and fired 3 precise shots that disabled the remaining guards without killing them. Commander. Thorn found himself alone and facing an unarmed human who had just neutralized 6 trained soldiers in less than 10 seconds. The reptilian officer's hands shook as he pointed his weapon at Jack's chest. "Stay back," Thorn hissed. "I will kill you where you stand," Jack smiled. And it was the most terrifying expression Thorn had ever seen on a human face. "You made this personal when you hurt my son. Now you're going to learn why that was the worst mistake of your miserable life." "I have diplomatic immunity," Thorn protested. "The Federation will not allow you to harm an official representative." "The Federation isn't here," Jack replied, stepping closer. "It's just you and me and the consequences of your actions." Thorn fired his weapon, but Jack was no longer where the energy bolt struck. The human had moved sideways with inhuman speed, and now his hand was closing around Thorn's throat. The commander felt his feet leave the ground as Jack lifted him effortlessly. "You wanted to teach humans about fear," Jack said conversationally as Thorn struggled uselessly in his grip. "Let me show you what real fear looks like." Jack carried the alien commander to the window and held him outside the building 4 stories. Above the street, Thorn's weapon clattered to the pavement below as his claws scrabbled desperately at Jack's iron grip. "Please," Thorn gasped. "I was following orders." "So was I," Jack replied. "My orders are to protect my family from threats like you." Captain Brooks arrived with human security forces just as Jack was explaining to Commander Thorn exactly what would happen to any alien who threatened Danny Carter again. The reptilian officer was babbling promises and apologies by the time Jack pulled him back inside. "Jack," Brooks called out, "half the Zephyrian regiment is surrounding this building. We need to get you and your family out of here." Jack looked out at the street where alien soldiers were taking positions behind vehicles and barriers. "How many? 25, maybe 30, Brooks replied. "They're demanding your immediate surrender. And if I don't surrender, they're threatening to level the hospital," Brooks said grimly. "Governor Mason is trying to negotiate, but they're not listening." Jack set Commander Thorn down and zip-tied his hands behind his back. The alien officer was still shaking from his experience hanging outside the window. "Linda, take Danny to the basement," Jack ordered. "Brooks, get all hospital staff and patients to the lower levels." "What are you going to do?" Linda asked, though she already knew the answer. "What I always do," Jack replied, checking his weapons. "End the threat." "Jack, there are too many of them," Linda protested. "Even you can't fight 30 soldiers alone." Jack kissed her forehead gently. "I won't be alone." As if summoned by his words, the hospital's communication system crackled to life. A familiar voice filled the building, speaking with calm authority. "Attention Zephyrian forces, this is Ace Griffin speaking from the ship currently. Targeting your position from orbit," the bounty hunter announced. "You have 60 seconds to withdraw from the hospital before I demonstrate what happens to people who threaten the Ghost's family." Commander Thorn's eyes widened with terror. "Griffin the hunter works with you, old friends," Jack explained. "We served together during the border wars." The Zephyrian soldiers outside began looking nervously at the sky. Ace Griffin's reputation as a bounty hunter was almost as fearsome as Jack's reputation as a soldier. The combination of both men working together was enough to make even veteran troops reconsider their tactics, but the aliens had their orders, and General Salvani was monitoring their communications. The Zephyrian commander was not willing to show weakness by retreating from a single human, even one as dangerous as the American Ghost. "All units advance," came the order from the alien command ship. "Take the building and capture the terrorist." Jack watched through the window as 30 Zephyrian soldiers began their assault on the hospital. They moved with professional skill, using covering fire and tactical formations that would have been effective against any normal defender. Unfortunately for them, Jack Carter was anything but normal. He activated the communication device that connected him to Ace's ship and spoke a single word that sent chills down the spine of every human who heard it. Phantom, the word was a code from the border wars, a signal that meant all restrictions were lifted and the Ghost was free to use any method necessary to complete his mission. Across the galaxy, former enemies, who heard that transmission would have run for their lives. Jack moved to the hospital's upper floors, carrying weapons that had been carefully hidden throughout the building during his days of preparation. The Zephyrians wanted a war, and he was about to give them exactly what they had asked for. In the basement, Linda held Danny close and listened to the sounds of battle beginning above them. She had always known this day might come when Jack's past would catch up with their family. Now she could only pray that the man she loved would survive what he was about to unleash. The American Ghost was going hunting, and the Zephyrian 3rd Regiment was about to learn why some legends should never be tested. The battle for New Haven Hospital lasted exactly 17 minutes and became the most recorded alien military defeat in Federation history. Every security camera in the building captured footage of Jack Carter moving through the Zephyrian assault force like death itself. The aliens came through the front entrance expecting to face a cornered human with limited ammunition and no backup. Instead, they found carefully placed explosive charges that turned their organized advance into chaos. Jack had spent days preparing the hospital as a fortress, and every corridor was a death trap waiting to be sprung. The first squad of 6 soldiers made it to the 2nd floor before Jack appeared behind them like smoke. His weapons were a mixture of human military technology and captured Zephyrian equipment modified for maximum effectiveness. The aliens never had a chance to call for help before they were eliminated with surgical precision from orbit. Ace Griffin provided tactical support using sensors that could track every Zephyrian movement through the building. His voice crackled through Jack's earpiece, providing real-time intelligence. "Ghost, you have 8 hostiles moving up the east stairwell," Ace reported. "Another 12 regrouping in the lobby for a second assault." "Copy that, Hunter," Jack replied as he set another explosive charge. "How long before their reinforcements arrive?" "General Salvin's command ship is 3 hours out," Ace answered. "But he's broadcasting surrender demands on all Federation channels." "Thinks he can pressure the colonial government to hand you over," Jack smiled grimly as he moved to intercept the next group of soldiers. "Let him try." The Zephyrians on the east stairwell never saw Jack coming. He dropped from an air vent above them, landing in their midst with weapons blazing. The confined space worked against the aliens as their superior numbers became a liability. Jack moved among them like a phantom, striking and disappearing before they could react. In the hospital basement, Linda listened to the sounds of battle echoing through the building. Danny had insisted on monitoring the security feeds despite his injuries, and his face was pale as he watched his father in action. "I never knew," Danny whispered as Jack eliminated another group of soldiers. "I never knew he could do things like this. Your father was the most dangerous man in the galaxy once," Linda said quietly. "I hope those days were behind us, but the Zephyrians brought them back." Captain Brooks had set up a command post in the basement, coordinating with Ace Griffin's ship and monitoring Federation communications. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and intense. "Half the Federation Council is demanding explanations," Brooks reported. "The other half is asking how one human can defeat an entire alien military unit." "What's Governor Mason doing?" Linda asked. "Hiding in his office and refusing to take calls," Brooks replied. "He knows his career is over after this." On the 3rd floor, Jack found himself facing the last organized group of Zephyrian soldiers. They had barricaded themselves in the surgery wing and were demanding safe passage off the planet. Their leader was a young lieutenant who was clearly terrified but trying to maintain military discipline. "American Ghost, we know you can hear us," the lieutenant called out. "We surrender unconditionally. We request safe passage according to Federation military law." Jack's voice echoed through the hospital's communication system. "You attacked my son. You threatened my family. Federation law doesn't apply here anymore. Please, we were following orders," the lieutenant pleaded. "We did not know who your son was when we heard him. That makes it worse, not better," Jack replied. "You hurt an innocent child because you thought he was helpless?" The final assault came from an unexpected direction. Jack used the hospital's own systems against the aliens, flooding their position with medical gas that left them unconscious but alive. When the smoke cleared, all 6 Zephyrians were zip-tied and helpless. The hospital fell silent except for the moans of wounded aliens scattered throughout the building. Jack had eliminated or captured 30 trained soldiers without losing a single human life. The legend of the American Ghost had been reborn in spectacular fashion. General Salvin's command. Ship arrived to find his 3rd Regiment in complete disarray. Half his soldiers were dead or wounded, and the survivors were babbling about a human phantom who could appear anywhere and kill without being seen. Commander Thorne was found tied up in the hospital basement, rocking back and forth and muttering about hanging from windows. The general himself was a veteran of many conflicts, but what he saw on New Haven shook him to his core. One human had destroyed his elite regiment using tactics and technology that seemed impossible. The security footage showed Jack moving with superhuman speed and precision, eliminating threats with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. How is this possible? Salvane demanded as he reviewed the battle recordings. No single warrior should be capable of such destruction. His intelligence officer pulled up files that had been classified for 20 years. General, this is Lieutenant Colonel Jack Carter, formerly of Earth's Phantom Squad. He was responsible for over 300 enemy casualties during the border wars. His unit was never defeated in direct combat. Salvane stared at the files with growing horror. The American Ghost is real, very real, sir, the officer confirmed. And apparently very unhappy about what happened to his son. The aftermath of the hospital battle sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Federation Council demanded a full investigation while human colonies across the Outer Rim celebrated their first major victory against alien oppression. The footage of Jack's single-handed defeat of the Zephyrian Regiment became the most watched video in Galactic history. Danny recovered from his injuries with a new understanding of his father's true nature. The boy who had been beaten for standing up to bullies was now the son of the most feared warrior in known space. The knowledge was both terrifying and empowering. Jack and Linda reconciled their differences as they realized that their family's strength came from standing together. The man who had once been too dangerous to live with had become the only thing standing between his loved ones and those who would harm them. Governor Mason resigned in disgrace and was replaced by Captain Brooks, who implemented new security protocols that gave human colonists real protection. The Zephyrian military was banned from human space pending a full investigation of their activities. General Salvane was recalled to his homeworld in shame, where he spent the rest of his career explaining how the legendary 3rd Regiment had been destroyed by a single human father protecting his child. The story became a cautionary tale told in military academies across the galaxy. Most importantly, the systematic abuse of human colonists ended immediately. Word spread quickly through alien military circles that humans were not the weak prey species some had believed them to be. They had protectors who would go to any length to defend the innocent and the helpless. Jack Carter retired from his shadowy career and became a full-time father, but his legend lived on. Across the galaxy, when alien commanders considered aggressive action against human settlements, they remembered the name American Ghost and decided that peaceful coexistence was a much safer option. The boy who had been beaten in an alley had been avenged, and the father who loved him had reminded the galaxy why humanity deserved respect.